I have never said this next sentence out loud to another living person. Not to Aunt Diane, who drives over from Eastlake every other Saturday with sweet potato pie. Not to the counselor I saw twice last spring and could not afford a third time. So I am going to say it here, to you, to a camera. For 6 years I was punished inside my own home, by a man who never once raised his voice and never once raised his hand. And I called it love, and I stayed. Before I tell you exactly what my husband was permitted to do to me, the things that in any courtroom in this country would have a name and a statute and a number on a docket, I need you to understand the house I married into. It was the same house I was raised in. It was the truth. And in the Decatur West congregation, what a husband does to correct a wife is not called punishment. It is called headship. It is on the page. It is printed in a manual that sat on the shelf in our apartment for 6 years, and I am going to tell you what was in it. I promise you that. But first you have to understand how a young woman from a good black family in Atlanta sits inside that for 6 years and thanks Jehovah for the privilege. So stay in the room with me. Do not subscribe for me. Subscribe so that the next black sister scrolling at 2 a.m, the one who is counting the silences in her own house tonight, knows she is not the only one who ever counted them. Tell me in the comments the back room you remember. I read every one. I was 18 years old the night I married Trey Coleman. We had met at a circuit assembly the year before, when I was 17, and he had come to my father with his intentions the way a brother is supposed to, and we had 10 chaperoned months and not 1 minute alone in a room before the wedding. I want you to hear that. I had spent more uninterrupted time with the sister who did my hair than I had ever spent alone with the man I promised the rest of my life to, in front of 200 people at the Decatur West Hall. The first apartment was a 1-bedroom off Memorial Drive, 15 minutes from the hall my grandfather helped build in 1987. I was so happy in that apartment those first months that it embarrasses me now to remember it. I ironed his ministry shirts on Saturday mornings. I had his reasoning from the scriptures and his field service bag by the door before he asked. I thought that was love. Nobody had ever taught me a different word for it. You have to understand the rhythm I had been raised inside, because the rhythm is what makes a cage feel like a home. 5 meetings a week. Field service on Saturday mornings, knocking the doors of Decatur and Eastlake with my reasoning book. The same streets my grandfather Joseph had walked when he left the Baptist church in 1968. The Watchtower study every Sunday. The home study on Tuesday nights, the two of us at the small table. There was no hour of my week that did not belong to the organization, and I did not experience that as a loss. I experienced it as safety. When every minute is accounted for, you never have to sit in a quiet room and ask yourself a dangerous question. The truth had built me a life with no quiet rooms in it, and the corrections came in quietly, the way a temperature drops. There was a way I learned to dress, and a way I learned to wear my hair so as not to draw attention, because a sister who draws attention is a sister whose husband is not keeping his house in order, and that reflects on him in front of the body of elders. I did not see that as a punishment either. I saw it as being a good wife. That is the genius of the thing. By the time the real corrections started, I had already been taught, my whole life, to call correction love and to call control protection. Trey was not a loud man. I need you to understand that because the picture people have in their heads when I say the word punishment is wrong. He did not throw things. He did not call me names. In 6 years of marriage, he never once spoke to me in anger that a neighbor could have heard through a wall. The cruelty in my home did not arrive that way. It arrived quietly, on schedule, with scripture behind it, and the worst part, the part I am only now learning the words for, is that it was correct. It was procedurally correct. Everything that was done to me had a citation. The way it started was so small that I cannot give you a date for it. Sometime in that first year, I learned that there were 2 versions of my husband. There was the Trey who was warm at the meeting, who shook hands at the literature counter and laughed with the older brothers. And there was the Trey who came home from a service meeting, set down his bag, and did not speak to me for 2 days because I had said something at the study that he felt made us look unsettled in front of the hall. The silence was the instrument. He had learned it somewhere. I would learn later exactly where. In our home, we had a copy of a book most witnesses never hold in their own hands. Shepherd the Flock of God, the Elder's Manual. Trey was being prepared, the way his father had been, the way they wanted my brother Marcus to be, and so he had his own copy, and it lived on the shelf above the television, next to the bound volumes of the Watchtower. I used to dust it. I used to think it was holy. I did not know yet that I lived inside it. The second year of a marriage is supposed to be the part where you learn each other. What I learned, in the truth, in the Decatur West congregation, was the system that stood behind my husband like a wall, because Trey was never improvising. That is the thing I most want a young sister to hear. When he punished me, he was not losing his temper, and he was not being a bad man. He was administering something. He was applying a doctrine that had been handed to him, the same way it had been handed to his father, Elder Marcus Coleman of the East Atlanta congregation, and to that man's father before him. Headship is the word. The organization teaches that the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the congregation. It sounds like poetry until you live underneath it. Underneath it, in practice, it meant that my husband held a kind of authority over me that no one in my life held over him. He answered to the elders. I answered to him, and then, through him, to the elders. There was a chain, and I was the last link. And the last link does not get to speak to the ones at the top. So here is what that chain was permitted to do, and I want you to keep a courtroom in your mind while I list it, because every one of these has a name out there in the world. The silent treatment as correction, days of it, calibrated, until I apologized for a thing I often could not name. The monitoring of what I read. Trey went through the small stack of library books on my nightstand more than once, and a novel that he felt was worldly would simply be gone, and we would not discuss it. The monitoring of who I could love. My friendship with Amani Howard, the closest friend I had on this earth from the time I was 12, was steered to death. Too much private fellowship between sisters, the elders' wives said, can become sentimental, can distract from spiritual things. I let it die. I helped it die. And the money. We had one account, and it was his account, and I was given what I needed for the house and asked to account for it. I was 21 years old before I understood that other women out in the world, women at the Georgia State campus where I take classes now, would have heard the way my household ran and known a word for it that I did not have. I did not have any words then. The truth does not give you words for what the truth does to you. That is not an accident. That is the design. Out there, beyond the parking lot of the Kingdom Hall, a man who controls every dollar his wife touches, who decides what she may read and whom she may love, who uses cold withdrawal as a tool of discipline against another adult. Out there, that has a name. I learned the name last year. I was sitting alone in my apartment in Decatur, and I watched a documentary I will not name here, and a woman on the screen said 2 words, coercive control, and I had to stop the screen and sit on the floor. Coercive control. Not a fight, not a bad marriage, a pattern, a method, a thing with a shape, and my marriage had had that exact shape for 6 years, and the shape had a manual on the shelf above my television, and the manual was holy. I am not the only black sister who lived this. I want to tell you about my Aunt Diane, my mother's older sister, because her story is the one that walks ahead of mine in time. Diane married an elder in 1986, a man named Robert Coleman, and she stayed in that marriage 14 years. She called it, once, to me, sitting on the floor of my apartment because I still do not own a kitchen table. She called it a private kingdom of small cruelties. 14 years. She left the truth in 2003, and was shunned by my entire family, including my mother, for 19 years. She is the reason I am alive in this story. She found me on Instagram in 2022 and sent me one sentence: "When you are ready, I am here." I was not ready for another 2 years, but she had said it, and it saddened me, the way a key sits in a drawer before you know what it opens. Now I have to keep my promise to you, because I told you at the top that I would tell you what the manual said, and what the night was that I understood I was being punished and not corrected, and I have made you wait long enough. Here is the moment the whole 6 years cracked open. It was March of 2022. We were doing the home study on a Tuesday night, the two of us at the small table, the watchtower open between us, and I asked a question. That is all. I asked a question about an article, an honest one, the kind I had been taught my whole life that Jehovah welcomes from a sincere heart. Trey did not answer it. He did not argue with me. He closed the magazine very gently, and he prayed. He prayed for me, out loud, in our kitchen, that Jehovah would soften my heart and restore my spirit of submission. And then he went to bed, and the next day, while I was at my part-time job, he called Brother Davis. 3 of them came that Sunday afternoon. 3 brothers, in my living room, on my couch, with their Bibles, to study with me, they said, for 2 hours. My husband sat beside me the entire time and did not say a word, because he had already said the only word that mattered, which was the phone call. I want you to sit in that with me. I asked my husband a question about a magazine, and the consequence the organization permitted him was to summon 3 grown men into the home where I slept, to correct the thinking of a 22-year-old woman, and to make her understand, gently, with scripture, that the question itself was the sin. That is what was in the manual. Not a single bruise, not a single raised voice. A system in which a husband could deputize the entire body of elders against his own wife for the crime of a question, and call it shepherding, and be right. Out in the world, that would be called isolating her, monitoring her, punishing dissent. The documentary had a phrase: the controlling of a person through the slow narrowing of her world. In the truth, it is called loving discipline. The same act, 2 countries. One of them would arrest you. The other one would appoint you. And I want to tell you the thing I am most ashamed of, because I promised you the truth and not a clean version of myself. 2 years before that night, when I was 21, a younger sister in the congregation came to me, almost crying, because her husband had stopped speaking to her over money. And do you know what I told her? I told her to examine herself. I told her to be in subjection, to win him without a word, the way the scripture says, through her fine conduct. I sent that girl back into the exact silence I was living in, and I told her it was holy, because I believed it was, because the last link in the chain learns to tighten the chain on the link below her. I was not only punished, for a while I was also an instrument. That is what the system does. It makes the punished into the deputies. Trey was not a monster. I have to say that, and I have to mean it, because if I let him be a monster, then I get to be only a victim, and neither of those is the truth. Trey was a 22-year-old black brother who was handed the same hour his father was handed, and his father before him. He had a manual and a mentorship, and a whole architecture of older men telling him that a godly head of household corrects his wife. And he did exactly, precisely, what he was trained to do. And he did it believing it was love, the only vocabulary the truth had ever given a young black man for love. He remarried this past March, a 19-year-old sister from a neighboring congregation. I have seen her once, at a distance, at the Decatur Farmers Market. She is being given the same 6 years I was given, by the same body, in the same hall. I cannot save her. The only thing I can do is put down on a page, in plain words, what was done, so that if she ever goes looking for the words will be here. I left in November of 2024. I asked for the divorce without what they call scriptural grounds, and the judicial committee disfellowshipped me in the same season, 3 brothers in the back room of the hall my grandfather built, and my own mother has not spoken my name aloud since. My father sent one card at Christmas, praying you return to Jehovah, Dad. That is the entire text of my relationship with the man who raised me now. But I am not going to end on what it cost. I am going to end on Decatur, on a 1-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of an old brick building, walking distance to the MARTA, where there is no kitchen table yet, but there is a bookshelf I built myself out of pine and cinder blocks last winter, and where, on a Saturday, my Aunt Diane comes and sits on the floor with me and a sweet potato pie from a bakery on Memorial Drive, and does not ask me about Trey, and lets me say whatever I came to say. The copy of Shepherd the Flock of God is not on a shelf in my home. I did not keep it. The only thing I kept from that house was my grandfather's old Baptist hymnal, the one I found in my parents' basement when I was 10, and a phone with 1 screenshot in a folder, a single sentence from Aunt Diane that I read more than I will admit. A woman wrote to me a few weeks ago. I will not quote her because what she said was hers, but the shape of it was this. She said her husband had never hurt her, not once, and so she did not understand why she felt like a person who had survived something, and she was ashamed of the feeling, because what right did she have to it when there was no bruise to point to? I read that 3 times. I sat with my phone on the floor of my apartment, the floor where Aunt Diane and I eat pie on Saturdays, and I understood that this is the trap the system builds last and builds best. It makes you require evidence of your own suffering before you are allowed to feel it. And the one kind of harm it specializes in is the kind that leaves no evidence at all. So I will say to her what I am going to say to you. The thing I most needed somebody to say across a kitchen table when I was 22. The work of getting free is not loud either. It is the same size as the cruelty was, small, daily, quiet. It is a bookshelf you build yourself out of pine and cinder blocks, because nobody is going to tell you that you may not. It is a library book that nobody takes off your nightstand. It is the morning you finally take out the half wig you have worn since you were 15, and you sit on the bathroom floor and meet your own hair like a stranger you are going to love. Freedom did not arrive for me in a single night. It is arriving still, in pieces, the size of a Saturday. So let me say to you what no one said to me in time. If you grew up in a Black Kingdom Hall in Atlanta, or in a hall anywhere on this earth, and you have learned to read a man's silences the way other people read the weather, I see you. If you have ever sat on your own couch while 3 brothers corrected your mind, and your husband said nothing because he had already made the call, I see you. If you are counting the silences in your house tonight, and telling yourself it is love because it is quiet, because he has never once raised his hand, I see you, and I need you to hear the thing it took me 26 years and a documentary on a Tuesday night to finally understand. A punishment does not have to leave a mark to be a punishment. A cage does not have to have bars to be a cage. And the fact that no court in Georgia would ever charge a man for what was done to me does not mean it was not done. It only means there is not yet a law for the kind of harm that stays inside the walls of a Kingdom Hall marriage. The hall does not own you. I am the proof.